As Mark Twain said, faith is believing what you know ain't so. This is Freethought Radio on Air America.
I'm Annie Largala with Dan Barker for Freethought Radio.
And our very distinguished guest today is the scholar and author Barbara G. Walker. On first reading the King James Bible as a young teenager, she decided it sounded cruel. A God who would not forgive the world until his son had been tortured to death. That did not strike me as the kind of father I would want to relate to. Barbara majored in journalism at the University of Pennsylvania, married research chemist Gordon Walker, moved to Washington, D.C., where she worked at the Washington Star. Relocating to Morristown, New Jersey, she taught at the Martha Graham dance technique. She is a knitting expert, having written 10 volumes, including the classics Treasury of Knitting Patterns and a second treasury of knitting patterns. In the mid-'70s, she became part of the new feminist wave. She wrote the monumental feminist freethought source book, The Woman's Encyclopedia of Myths and Secrets. Her many other books published by Harper & Row include The Skeptical Feminist. An atheist, she's also specialized in debunking irresponsible New Age assertions about such things as crystals.
Welcome back to Freethought Radio, Barbara.
Thank you. It's a joy to be here.
And before we talk about the origins of this time of year, what this thing called Christmas really came from, I'd love to have you tell that story about your awakening as a young girl when your dog had died and you started to have doubts about religion because of what the minister said.
Oh, yes.
Could you tell us that story?
I was grief-stricken because my beloved dog had died, and the minister came to visit my mother, and I asked him to tell me about how I would see my dog in heaven. And he told me I would not see my dog in heaven because dogs don't have souls and God does not allow them in heaven. I would, however, be able to see all my relatives. So I thought I could negotiate. I said I would be happy to trade a couple of aunts and uncles for my dog, and he wouldn't accept that. So I became angry and had a fit, and I stamped my foot and ran away crying, saying I didn't want anything to do with this nasty old heaven. My mother was terribly embarrassed, made me come back and apologize, but I didn't understand why I had to apologize.
The priest should apologize. Yeah, because we human animals don't have souls either now. Somebody should tell that priest.
Yeah, I think so.
Now, we thought of you in discussing what the origins are of the winter solstice and so many of the festivities at this time of year that have really been co-opted by Christianity. Where do we start?
Well, all of them have been co-opted. There is not one original item about Christmas that did not come from a pagan religion. Not one.
Shall we start with the biggie, which would be the
Christ figure,
yes.
Of course. Long before there was Christianity or Judaism, people worried about the winter solstice when the sun is at the nadir, and they were never sure that it would come back. So they devised all kinds of magical rituals to make it come back, and it was always symbolized by a birth, the rebirth of the sun god. And the god who was born at the winter solstice was called such things as Light of the World, Son of Righteousness, Savior, Son of God, Good Shepherd.
Sounds familiar.
Who rises with healing in his wings, and so forth. And his other names were such as Krishna, Osiris, Orpheus, Heracles, Dionysus, Mithra, Attis, and Adonis, who entered into Hebrew tradition as Adonai, the Lord. All of these sun heroes also had the title of Christos, or Christ, which means, in Greek, the Anointed One.
So these are the sun gods.
These are all sun gods.
And so many Christians today have never even heard of them and don't realize that they're just believing in a latter-day sun god.
Exactly. Well, let's take, for example, Mithra, whose Persian title was Messiah. In Hebrew, that's Mashiach. And he was enormously popular in Rome, where his temple stood on Vatican Hill until the 6th century.
Wasn't he Persian, though, Mithra?
He was Persian originally, but the the Roman legions worshipped him, and he became one of the big gods in Roman Empire. Mithra was born of the usual virgin on December 25th, which was called Birthday of the Unconquered Sun, which also an epithet of Jesus. Christians adopted this particular holiday in the 4th century and renamed it Christmas.
And all of these sun gods shared the same story. There was a virgin mother usually, wasn't there?
Always.
Always a virgin mother.
Always.
And a humble birth.
With a name that started with M usually, like Maya, Mira, Miriam, Mary.
Mary, yeah.
The mother.
The mother figure.
And what were the other similarities?
Mithra was sometimes said to have been witnessed, his birth was witnessed by angels and shepherds, and of course the 3 wise men who were known as magi in Persia, which means magicians, seers. Mithra also performed miracles of healing. He cast out devils. He made the blind see and the lame walk. He collected 12 disciples who represented the zodiacal signs around the sun.
Sounds familiar.
And his followers held their weekly services on Sunday.
The day of the sun.
Right. His death and resurrection took place at the vernal equinox.
Which is Easter?
Easter.
Time.
The name Easter comes from Celtic. It was named for the goddess Eostra, who was the springtime goddess. And Mithra's followers also looked forward to a great battle between the spirits of light and the spirits of darkness at the end of the world. And then Mithra, the Messiah, would return, and there would be a last judgment, and, the good would be separated from the evil, and so on. So it was basically the whole Christian story.
So the Christians just stole Christmas, didn't they?
They stole the entire thing. Even the sayings of Jesus, all of them came from previously published or printed sources.
Now, a lot of the trappings today of an American Christmas, come out of this pagan. What are some of the other borrowings?
Well, for example, the holly, which has always been a symbol of Christmas, was a plant sacred to the Germanic goddess Holle, Holle, and the red berries represented her blood drops, which kept the plant green all through the winter. And so this was a sacred, they used holly, and they also used pine boughs in the worship of Attis, who was another one of the virgin-born sacrifice saviors. And he, too, was killed and resurrected at the spring equinox. So all of this has been basically based on the turning of the seasons and what's happening in the heavens. These matters were very important to ancient people because they worried that things would not go on the same as they were.
What about something like what is now called today a Christmas tree?
Oh, the Christmas tree was originally, the pine tree, as I said, was sacred to Attis. But the Germanic pagans also worshipped a Christmas tree and put lights on trees at the winter solstice to encourage the regrowth of the light.
And it worked.
And it always does.
Yeah, the pagans got it right.
And I believe the first Christmas tree imported into England was brought by Queen Victoria's consort.
Who was German.
And I think that was his custom, and so he brought it into England.
And then I think they also didn't the Germans introduce it, and the Unitarians popularized the Christmas tree in the 19th century in America, I think.
Right, and that is why it is still a Tannenbaum.
Tannenbaum. And all of that harkens back to the pagan religions that nobody believes in anymore.
Yes.